Alright guys, so we actually just got a new Infernoble Knight card that actually just dropped, and it is pretty dang busted, but I thought it would be very prudent of me to just actually explain what Infernoble Knight actually does, like what their gameplay is, then explain what the new card does, because if I'm just like, oh, this card is really insane, it does all this, and people are like, yeah, that's kind of broken, but if you don't actually know what the deck does and how it kind of synergizes with what they're already doing, then it might be like, alright, that's really cool and all, but like, what if the deck itself just kind of sucks, right? And so, yeah, sure, they got this really broken card, but, you know, the deck's still not good. I mean, kind of look at something like Blue Eyes Jet Dragon. Like, Blue Eyes is, like, roguish at best, right? But Jet Dragon was, like, really broken, and so was Tyrant Dragon for the deck. But, you know, if you, like, read those at face value, you'd be like, oh my goodness, these things are kind of insane. And then in kind of practice, it's like, oh yeah, it just makes the deck a little bit better, right? It's not broken or anything, but, you know, in practice, it functions a little bit differently. So we're going to talk about that in today's video. If you have not already, make sure to leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel for, you know, future Yu-Gi-Oh content. Can't say daily Yu-Gi-Oh content yet, but, you know, I do try to upload at least 3 to 4 times a week over here on the Yu-Gi-Oh channel. If you're interested in like fake content or other anime content, I have 2 other channels that are also going to be linked down in the description down below. And about every other weekend, I host a Yu-Gi-Oh Master Duel tournament. The next one is going to be Gozen Match themed. If that kind of piques your interest or anything, my Discord is linked down in the description down below. You can DM me a deck list you want to run, and you can actually see like all the rules and everything in the announcements channel. So with all that being said, let's kind of talk about Infernoble Knight. And the main thing they're known for is Smoke Grenade of the Thief, right? Like, this is basically a equip spell that they are just going to loop like 700 billion times to hand loop your opponent. Basically, if you don't know what that is, hand looping is where you just completely remove all of the cards from your opponent's hand, ideally like on turn 1. So then you're just like, yes, go ahead, sir, play Yu-Gi-Oh with no cards. Now, obviously, nowadays, that's not quite as good. You have cards like Tier Elements that are just, like, absolutely loving to be in the graveyard, or even decks that were kind of popping off, like, a couple of formats ago, even, like, Phantom Knight, right? Like, even they like to be in the graveyard, right? Even stuff like that. Even more rudimentary than that, stuff like Blue Eyes even nowadays like to be in the graveyard, right? Like, stuff like Hero likes to be in the graveyard, right? So it's not, like, quite as crazy, but it's still like the main thing that they're known for. They're also known for things like, you know, Aqua Dolphin sniping out hand traps out of their opponent's hands, running things like Neo Space Connector, who summons this guy directly from the deck. Then you're able to kind of like snipe a card out of your opponent's hand, you know, see like, oh yeah, they've got like an Ash Blossom or something, let me snipe that real quick, or something along those lines, right? And then, you know, you take those two, you go into Isold, and if you're a new player and you see anybody summon Isold, they're probably getting up to some shenaniganery, right? Like, they're probably getting into some weird nonsense, right? Isold is never really a good sign. Like, they're either just actually playing Noble Knights, right? And they're just playing like a fun, you know, kind of lore fate deck, right? Or they're about to do some gooning, right? But like pretty much all of the cards like in the archetype are based around like fire monsters. They're based around their equip spells, right? You have guys like Sublimation Knight who just like grabs you a fire guy from the deck. He has like a Gemini niche as well, but you're never using that. You're just using it to grab like some of your Infernoble Knights and such, right? Gearfried's kind of like one of your main deck boss monsters, right? Because as long as he has an equip spell, he can, you know, negate stuff, right? He can negate monster effects, which is always really, really good. Stuff like Living Fossil is able to like search you your different equip spells and such from the deck, right? And you can play like a decent bit of hand trap, as you can see right now. Like, we've got like Max Sheesh, we've got Imperm, we're able to like fit in cross out in Called By. Obviously, it'll look a little bit different depending on, you know, what format you're playing in, because I believe Smoke Grenade is banned in the TCG, but it should be completely legal in the OCG, if I remember correctly. Obviously, it's completely legal in Master Duel, right? So when this card comes to Master Duel, oh my goodness, get ready for the Infernoble Knight sleeper threat. But they're also able to go into like Auroradon combos, right? They do have O-Lion. They're able to make use of that. I'm sure everybody that's played Master Duel is like completely familiar with that stuff. They don't have Hulk anymore because Hulk got, you know, nay-nayed on. But, you know, their boss monster is pretty good. He can get quite big, quite large. You have Borreload Savage Dragon you can make, which, if you don't know, is basically a synchro monster that will then equip a link card from your graveyard. It'll gain, like, attack, and it'll gain counters for that. And basically, each link rating, right? So let's say it equips Nightmare Unicorn, it'll have 3 negates, but you can only use each once per turn. Baron you can make. I'm sure I don't need to explain what like Baron does. I'm sure I don't need to explain what Access Code does, right? So that's kind of like the basic gist of the deck, right? Like that's kind of like a very like watered down version of what Infernoble Knight does, right? So like hopefully you're kind of like, okay, I see what's going on. They like equip spells, they've got like fire guys, they're warriors, you know, they're trying to like hand loop our opponent. I kind of see what we're trying to do. Well, I should be flashing the card somewhere on screen right about now. So you'll be seeing this new Brave Beauty of the Ruby Regard Bradamante. So basically, new Infernoble Knight card. It is a tuner, which is also really important because their synchro monsters are pretty strong, right? And as I said, this like Emperor Charles guy over here is just insanely powerful, right? He's really, really good. And so it's going to give you an additional option to get into that guy, but it reads as follows. You can discard this card, then target one warrior monster you control, equip it with one appropriate equip spell from the deck. Now, the reason that's a little nutty is that like you have ways to search this because it's a warrior. It's also a fire, so it interacts with some of your other cards as well. And basically, it's going to function as not only extra copies for Smoke Grenade for you to be more easily able to find that, or able to find, you know, your other Infernoble Knight cards, or I don't even know, if you want to go into like the Phoenix Blade thing where you can like infinitely loop it or something like that, it can even do that if you want to play some like really cancerous like Infernoble Knight list. The fact that it's literally just like, yeah, dude, screw it, grab any equip spell from the deck already means this thing is probably going to get abused, right? I've said this a few times, but cards that just say screw it, grab one of this thing from the deck, like Verte saying screw it, any fusion spell, or Hulk being like every level 3 or lower tuner, just screw it, grab it. Those tend to be really broken. So I don't know if this will exactly be, you know, broken in Infernoble Knight immediately, but this is going to find a home somewhere because of the fact that it just says any equip spell, because maybe not now, but in the future, there will be some dummy broken equip spell and you're just going to slap that on somebody. That in and of itself is already really, really good. But then it just has this bonus effect where when this card that is not equipped with an equipped card is destroyed by battle with an opponent's monster and sent to the graveyard, you special summon this card back and then equip that monster that your opponent controls that destroyed this card. So it's not only any equipped spell pretty much in the game, right? As long as you're running warriors, but it's also like Snatch Steal, right? But you don't have to like pay 1,000 life points every single turn. And like you could just set this card or something, right? You could just set it in defense position or something along those lines. Your opponent's like, all right, I'm going to run over that real quick. Bada boom, bada bing, boom, give me that card, you know? Which is a little bit slow, admittedly, right? But it gives it a little bit more tech, right? And you can maybe like mind game your opponent or something like that. It's really, really strong. But I think you're primarily going to be using this as like an equip spell search. But just the fact that like it also just happens to be Snatch Steal at the same time is just ridiculously broken, right? And it's going to find I'm assuming a really good home in Infernoble Knight list. By the way, if you're like looking at this and you're actually like a hardcore Infernoble Knight player, this is not like a prime ideal list, right? Just kind of like slap some stuff together to kind of be like, oh yeah, this looks kind of like an Infernoble list. Although I could probably like, you know, be like, oh, we could sneak in like Colossus because we're running Corridor, right? You know, stuff like that. So I don't want anyone to be like, actually ZTL, this list was not very ideal. Look, just trying to give you the basic bare bones, but I got all the main guys. But I think this Bradamante card is going to be pretty nasty. I think she's going to be pretty good at some point, right? Because again, just always remember that if there's a card that just says, screw it, grab any one of this thing, it's going to be broken at some point. Like that card is going to be like really degenerate or using something really OP at some point, right? That's just very nutty. So, you know, just wanted to kind of talk about this because I thought this card was stupid, dummy, broken, but I was like, you know, I should probably also talk about what Infernoble Knight actually does so people understand why this is good. And so kind of like establishing that, you know, they're a bunch of fire guys, the fact that like their synchro monsters are all like really good. I mean, not just their own boss monsters, but even like Baron and Borreload like are really good for the deck. The fact that like their main like claim to fame was like looping Smoke Grenade to the Thief that like hand loops your opponent. You know, I thought that'd be really good to establish. But if there's anything else you guys want me to talk about, make sure to leave that in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to get around to it. I'm planning on actually starting a beginner's guide series, right? I'm going to just, like, cover just a lot of just various beginner stuff in Yu-Gi-Oh! From, like, hand traps to, like, what good draw cards are and what draw cards you want to play in certain decks, what are floodgates and which ones are good for your decks, if any are good for your deck, stuff along those lines. So a lot of stuff to look forward to in the future, I believe. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace. Late, guys.